Been here with you, and on the line with us is Dr. Richard Wolff, and Professor Wolff is an economist. He's the co-founder of democracyatwork.info is the website. rdwolff with 2fs.com is other website. He's the author of numerous books. His most recent, Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, and you can tweet him at Prof. Wolff, Profwolff. Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
Let me set you up with a juxtaposition. We have billionaires in Davos on the one hand who are like Wilbur Ross this morning, the billionaire commerce secretary in Trump's cabinet, said, well, I don't know what's wrong with these federal workers. Why can't they just go to their bank or credit union and get a loan? So you've got that, this kind of cluelessness, and then you've got another billionaire in Davos yesterday was quoted as saying that, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's suggestion of a 70% tax rate over $10 million happened, what would happen to two wage earner households? We have to have two people working in a household to keep the economy humming. So we got that on the one hand. We've got these bizarre, clueless oligarchs meeting in Davos. And then on the other hand, you've got the country that Mike Pence pointed out yesterday or the day before, that Venezuela has the second largest oil reserves in the world, outside, second to the Middle East, the region of the Middle East. And, we're starting to seriously mess with not just their economy. We've been doing that for some time, but also with their government. We're not recognizing Maduro's re-election, and we're saying, no, this 35-year-old guy who's, into libertarianism and billionaires, he's actually the one we're going to recognize as the president of Venezuela. Do you see a common theme here?
Yes, I see a system that is exploding, that is producing these kinds of absurd contradictions and very, very extreme behavior. It's been coming. It's been noted for quite a while. The cluelessness that you refer to, it also blew my mind, particularly Commerce Secretary Ross's commentary. It shows you that the divide is so severe that literally the people on the two sides not only don't understand each other, but what is much worse is they're able to understand the other one in terms of fantastic make-believe, and that's a sign of severe disruption of society. And I think for me, it's sort of the last milestone on a society that cannot hold itself together and seems to imagine that that's not a problem. Although I have been reading papers that have circulated at the Davos conference that indicate quite a few big investors are aware, have overcome this divide, and are warning the folks gathered there, these super rich politicians and CEOs and so on, that the social divide is threatening everything they have and everything they do. And so there are even panels on that subject, and those panels then have a few people saying, look, this is terrible, we have to deal with the social divide. And then the other side, like Ross and the politicians particularly, needing to pretend everything is rosy and lovely. It's quite a spectacle. For me as an economist, it's clear to me that the society is polarizing. It's clear to me that capitalism's justification for most of the post-World War II period was the claim that it created and sustained a large middle class. If you're a society that is held together around that idea and you are systematically eviscerating the middle class, you ought to be worried about where that leads.
Yeah. Somebody tweeted to me this morning that the Roman Republic and the Greek Republic both lasted about 250 years. Is that the period of time it takes for corruption to finally overtake a democratic or quasi-democratic experiment? Is that just too facile? Is that just too cute? Or is there something to that?
Oh, no, I think there's something to it, and I think it links perfectly, which is probably why it occurred to you, to the extraordinary behavior in Venezuela. You have an election there, like most elections, it's got its problems and its flaws and all the rest, but you have an election, you have an elected government. The United States doesn't like the elected government, so it is deciding to give the government to somebody else. And this in a country where the United States tried with the previous leader, Hugo Chavez, to bump him out of office, only to have that come back and destroy the relationship between that country and the United States. I mean, maybe the phrase "Make America Great Again" literally means going back to the old colonial imperialist days of manifest destiny in the United States. But this is a society that, can't control itself internally, and at that moment, instead of facing that problem, is overreaching around the world, trying to control what happens in Afghanistan, what happens in Iraq, what happens in Syria, and now opening yet another front. It does remind you of Greece, Rome, the British Empire, at a certain point imploding because it cannot face its real problems and keeps overreaching until it literally destroys itself.
Now, there are those who suggest that the British Empire, since you mentioned that, and by the way, it would be a fascinating thought experiment, or maybe a science fiction novel, to wonder what would have happened if, after the election here in November of 2016, the European Union said, well, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes. We're going to recognize her as the legitimately elected president of the United States. We're not going to talk to Trump. But in any case, back to the British Empire. It has been suggested, or in fact, I don't even remember where I learned this or read this, but it was many years ago, that the reason that the British Empire survived essentially its own collapse, after World War I and World War II, or in that region, the first part of the 20th century, that time region, was because they turned to democratic socialism, because they built out a national health care system, because they built a strong social welfare system, because the loss of empire brought with it a major economic and political shock, and that by cushioning the blow at the bottom, they increased the resilience of their country and were able to make it through. And in fact, I was talking with Kate Pickett day before yesterday, who wrote The Spirit Level, and she and Richard Wolff do this brilliant stuff on inequality, and she was talking about how this has been ripped apart basically since Maggie Thatcher came in, making Britain all the more vulnerable. What are your thoughts on that? And is there a cautionary tale for us here?
Absolutely, and I think it's true of a number of other European countries. The crisis of the Great Depression laid waste to France, to Germany, to Italy, to most of continental Europe, and it kind of provoked in those societies a fundamental split. Some of them went to the left, like France. Some of them went to the right, like Germany and Italy. But the capitalism as we knew it was obliterated in those societies in favor of either a leftist solution of a kind of general democratic socialism, or in the case of Germany and Italy, fascism, and then the war between these polarities happened. That's why I say you have to be extraordinarily blind not to see the danger in what is happening domestically, now compounded by the United States being at war in half a dozen countries and adding new military conflicts. If the military in Venezuela does not go with this new guy declaring himself the leader, what is going to happen there? And what is the United States going to do once it is now implicitly involved in what may become a civil war? Nobody's asking the questions. There's this knee-jerk political behavior trying to cope with this or that aspect without facing that the underlying economic system is not working to sustain the kind of economy Americans have come to expect, and that's a recipe for dissent.
Yeah, and I would add to that the political system has been corrupted now by the people who've corrupted the economic system. Brilliant stuff, Dr. Richard Wolff. It's always great talking with you. Thanks so much for dropping by today.
Okay, and talk to you again soon.
Indeed. DemocracyAtWork.info and rdwolf with 2fs.com are the websites. You can tweet him at ProfWolff, ProfWolff. His most recent book, Capitalism's Crisis Deepens. We'll be right back.